of the moment on ABC's This Week.
This misconduct goes on. The threat to our election integrity coming up goes on. It's a clear and present danger, I think, to our democracy, and not something that we can turn away from simply because the Republicans in the House refuse to do their duty and continue to put the person of the president above their constitutional obligation.
Meantime, 5 aides to a New Jersey congressman switching parties say they are resigning. Congressman Jeff Van Drew says he plans to vote against impeachment later this week and change from a Democrat to a Republican. America's listening to Fox News.
Did you know that home loan rates have plunged again? Would you like to take advantage of these lower rates to help lower your monthly payments? Refinancing doesn't have to be for another 30 years. It can be for 10, 15, or 20 years. It's up to you. Reduce your monthly payments. Pay off your loan earlier. At Bank Pacific, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Credit conditions apply.
Half a day. This is Melanie Mendiola.
And this is Ricky Hernandez. We're with the Guam Economic Development Authority.
And we're both alumni of the University of Guam. We're calling on our fellow alumni to make an investment in Guam's future by contributing to the G is for Giving campaign. With your donation, you are giving more students the opportunity to graduate, making Guam a better place.
To make a tax-deductible donation, log on to give.uog.edu before December 31st or call 735-2957 for more information.
Viva UOG!
Major League Baseball threatening to cut ties with minor league baseball. Presidential hopeful in Vermont, Senator Bernie Sanders calling for everyone to come together to save America's pastime.
This is not a particularly political issue. This is an issue where Democrats and Republicans and independents and conservatives and progressives all agree. Baseball is our national pastime. Minor league baseball is the heart and soul of baseball in general. And together, we're going to do everything we can to preserve these 42 teams.
Meantime, 2 teenagers are now under arrest in connection with Saturday's shooting in a busy suburban Atlanta mall at the height of Christmas shopping season. Fox's Tom Rigotti with that story.
Videos posted online show people with shopping bags running in all directions from the Cumberland Mall food court after the shooting. Some hid under counters and tables. Both suspects, aged 18 and 19, are being held at the Cobb County Adult Detention Center. The victim, also 18, was shot in the neck and treated for non-life-threatening injuries. Police called the incident a dispute between people who knew each other. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
And an arrest after an annual tradition in New York City where scores of people dress up as Santa Claus. Fox's Ann Carrick reports.
SantaCon to the rescue. Several Santas come to the aid of a train passenger subduing a stabbing suspect Saturday evening on the Long Island Railroad. Officials and witnesses say 2 men squared off on the eastbound train out of Manhattan. MTA police arresting the 45-year-old suspect, not in a Santa suit, and transporting the 22-year-old stabbed in the leg to the hospital. The whole thing caught on cell phone video. A Twitter user clarifying it was not the SantaCon participants causing the problem. MTA officials say the stabbing is not related to SantaCon. Ann Carrick, Fox News.
Riot police in Hong Kong on the streets firing tear gas just as mainland Chinese officials meet with the city-state's leader. I'm Jessica Stone. This is Fox News.
A diamond ring turns into a black pearl and hangs shimmering in the sky.
Join 93.3 The Point for a spectacular celestial event. On the evening of December 26th, a rare solar eclipse will take place just before sunset.
We see the sun's atmosphere, normally not visible.
Most of the sun will be blocked during the eclipse, leaving only a ring of fire visible, and we have the best seats and the safest way to watch it.
It's one of the great wonders of the solar system.
Join us at the Point Coffee Lounge at the Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort from 4 to 6 p.m. on December 26th. The first 100 guests will receive a pair of Eclipse viewing glasses, a complimentary glass of iced tea, and a coupon good for discounts at Sheraton's Surfers Point Bar or La Cascada Buffet Restaurant. Join us for the Point's 2019 Eclipse Viewing Party, December 26th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the beautiful Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort. Brought to you in part by Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort, Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, and your sky-watching friends at 93.3 The Point.
Talk Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Right, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What was that you were saying about Bank Pacific just a minute ago?
Oh, they just renewed sponsorship of the Tall Tales show.
Really?
For another 6 months.
Wow. You know, they're apparently not really good at handling your money, but they have very good taste and also a commitment to the right ideology. Okay. Does Bank Pacific have branches?
I think they do, but I think they have roots.
Where others place branches,
they place roots.
Bank Pacific places roots. Yeah. Hooray for Bank Pacific. Okay, so let's go straight into Zemi Ikotny. I've got my blue pencil here. Well, over the weekend, the Daily News outdid itself. Not only did they not have a local editorial, they didn't even have a local newspaper. Yeah, if you went to King's on Sunday after Mass, you would have seen that the vending machine there was empty. And I heard somebody say, "Wow, they sold out already." But if you went online, you found a little message there saying, there will be no Daily News today because of mechanical difficulties. Well, I guess mechanical difficulties is better than saying we didn't put out a newspaper today because we didn't have anything to say. But here we are with the Daily News so-called editorial. Today, instead of running an editorial, they've got Elliot Haspel, special to USA Today. And he said, we need free early child care and education. The debate over free college recently popped up back to the surface, courtesy of South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Unpronounceable, advertising his opposition to a policy that would benefit the children of millionaires. Now, you certainly shouldn't do that. The clash that followed, Senator Elizabeth Warren personally responded, has been a bit surreal because it reveals a double standard. Many of the same voices who support universal free college do not support universally free birth to 5 early education. The argument for universally free college with no income means test boils down to whether college is a public good. There is enough societal benefit to certain goods, fire departments, roads, K-12 public schools, that we finance them through tax dollars with no fee to the end loser. The fact that affluent citizens who could afford such fees get to take part is a feature, not a bug. What's more, proponents point out universal programs tend to be better funded, more politically robust, and far less administratively burdensome. So that's enough. You know, once again, it's not a local editorial, and it's for once it's not bashing Donald Trump, but it comes from where the USA Today folks are located, and that's over there on the left side of things. So, you know, the argument is about free stuff. We should give, if we're going to give this free stuff, then we should give that free stuff. So it's all about free stuff, which, of course, is what the left is all about, somehow attempting to delude people into thinking that they could make everything free, when even the real Joe Cruz, or perhaps especially the real Joe Cruz, would tell you that there's no such thing as a free lunch, right, real Joe Cruz?
That's true.
Yeah. So, but that's the Democrat, the lefty approach to things. Let's promise them a lot of free stuff, and then we can stay in office. And this, of course, reminds me of Alexander Fraser Tytler's quote, which I read a couple weeks ago, but is really appropriate right now. Alexander says, "A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations has been 200 years. These nations have progressed through this sequence, from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to apathy, from apathy to dependence, from dependence back to bondage." So here we are, Mr. Elliot Haspel, special to the Daily News, and he jumps right in the middle of this argument. If we're going to have free college, shouldn't we have free pre-kindergarten classes? I mean, you know, what government is all about is free stuff. So it's only fair if we're going to give people free college after they graduate from high school, we should give them free birth to 5-year-old pre-kindergarten education. Free stuff. Yeah. Okay, and then we have the Daily News, as were the Post, not talking about free stuff. The Daily News, the Post says, on Friday, Guam Police Chief Steve Ignacio acknowledged his department was still waiting for the autopsy of a man who died in a shooting before dawn on Wednesday. "We can't say it's a homicide because the medical examiner hasn't done an autopsy yet," the police chief said. Without a full-time medical examiner, the government of Guam has to wait for a part-time forensic pathologist from Hawaii to conduct autopsies. It's been almost a year since the government of Guam's forensic pathologist for decades, Dr. Aurelio Espinola, retired and left Guam in January. By law, the chief medical examiner must be a licensed forensic pathologist. The Attorney General's office has been trying for more than a year now, going back to Attorney General Elizabeth Barrett Anderson's time, to recruit a licensed forensic pathologist, but the AG's office hadn't had success. The government of Guam's lackluster pay offer and the remoteness of Guam conspire to make this recruiting task difficult. It's clear that the AG's office has been making efforts, but the task shouldn't fall only to the Attorney General. The entire government of Guam leadership must work to make this an even higher priority. And I have to stop here and say, you know, maybe the governor could make this a higher priority than finding an abortionist to come to Guam to deal with our emergency resulting from the fact that no abortions have been reported for over a year and a half now. So maybe she could get Jane Flores to go out and look for a pathologist. We haven't heard Legislative Public Safety Chairman Senator Jose Pito Terlahi provide assurances this is a priority for him, and he's helping to find solutions. Well, as with the cockfighting ban, Jose Pito Terlahi may have to wait and see what the consensus of the legislature is before he does anything. If Gov Guam pays a licensed forensic pathologist more money to move to Guam, if it needs to, then it should. It does the public no good when police investigations are hamstrung because autopsies are on hold. A fatal shooting in Manila has unsettled the community. and in part because there's so little official information about the subject, possibly still at large. When Tamika Jadine Nauta was murdered more than a year ago, the public was also concerned the police weren't saying much about the subject before a man was arrested and charged. The lack of a forensic pathologist also does a disservice to grieving families of victims. An example of this is the aftermath of the murder of businessman Pyung-Sik Lee on February 19. It took nearly 7 weeks from the time he was killed until an autopsy report on Lee's death was released. Without an autopsy, authorities couldn't release Lee's body to his family to lay to rest. Now, there's a real tragedy. Without an autopsy, authorities couldn't release Lee's body to his family to lay to rest. So imagine how the relatives there, the family felt. The guy has been murdered, and obviously, you know, this is the hardest thing that people usually have to deal with, and grieving is the key word here. There are ways that people go about grieving, and certainly the last rites, the funeral, is an element of grieving. But this time they had to wait for 7 weeks because we don't have a pathologist. Not a good situation at all. And I want to go back and highlight something here. The government of Guam's government of Guam's lackluster pay office and the remoteness of Guam conspire to make this recruiting task difficult. And if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Two of our biggest problems here on the island are, number one, how many of us there are. There are only 165,000 of us. And number two, where we are. We're a long way from everything. So to expect a pathologist who's fighting the winter blasts back in Omaha, as an example, to say, yeah, I'm just going to pack up and move to Guam. I don't know much about it. I don't know anybody there. I don't have any friends there. But I'll try it. It's hard to get people to make that move. But it's something that that we really need to concentrate on because, as mentioned, it's holding up criminal prosecutions, and it's holding up the grieving process for people who already have a tough enough time as it is. If their husband, wife, father, mother, son, cousin, whatever, was killed in unfortunate circumstances. So, pretty good editorial today. And once again, no competition from the Daily, at least the Daily News put out a newspaper today. So, today, the coveted Blue Star goes to the Daily Post. And were it not for the raucous applause coming from the peanut gallery, you could probably hear the champagne corks popping at the editorial boardroom of the Post. So, let's see, we got a phone call here to start right off the day. And it's a caller who wants to make his mark. Okay, you may make your mark, Mr. Caller.
Hey, Bob. Good to hear from you. You know, I called you last week, and I asked you to do some research on that new law in New York where they basically 90% of crimes are not going to be required to have any cash bail. Did you ever get a chance to look at that?
The very next day, Mark, and I even...
Okay, and I apologize I wasn't listening.
Whoa. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so what is your take on it?
Actually, it isn't that dramatic. It's probably not a whole lot different than our system here. The biggest difference between New York law on bail and ours is that since 1971, in the state of New York, a judge can't consider the possible danger to the community of the detainee, but that wasn't part of this new law. The new law just says that for nonviolent crimes, release on recognizance, which is not far off from where we are.
Okay. All right. I'll actually dig into it now and take a really good look at it because, yeah, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before, Blue Bloods was already talking about it in their script. So I'm really curious, and I've read a couple of articles, but they might have been slanted. So we'll see how that works out. I'll do my own research.
Yeah. Okay, Mark.
You have a good rest of your day.
Okay. Well, stay in touch, Mark.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
All right. Boy, there's an honest guy. All up and admit that he missed an episode of Tall Tales. Whoa. Yeah. Give you high marks for candor there, Mark. Honesty, candor. I don't know about his neighbors. I don't know how his neighbors are going to react. Well, anyhow, he was very honest about it. Okay, so I've got a calendar. I mean, a card here. Yeah, I have a card here. There we go. Yeah. And I've got the fifth day of Christmas here. I've got Johnson versus Tall Tales. I've got Lee Weber versus God's an Arrow. I've got Lou Leon Guerrero versus Brennan's. And the really interesting item I've got on the calendar today is Weir versus the American Samoa government. And that probably won't get to that until after the big halftime show. It's one of those that I think our drive time audience is going to be interested in, so I probably won't get to it till after that. And then I've got some holdovers from before. I've got the left versus the Salvation Army, Antonio Gramsci versus Y'all, and I've added a new item as a preface to those, Victor Davis Hanson versus the left. So this is commentary on where the left, meaning primarily the Democrats, are trying to take our country and how, pardon the expression, screwed up they are. I also have an item on the card from before, U.S. versus China, that I will probably not get to today, but it'll remain on the card. Okay, so 12 days of Christmas. So I started out the 12 days of Christmas a couple days ago. Remember that on the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a partridge in a pear tree. And in California, you're running a risk if you're horsing around with pear trees. In California, a pear tree could very well be a controlled substance. The second day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 2 turtle doves. Another legal problem because turtle doves are on the endangered species list in England. And if we're importing turtle doves, we may run afoul of federal law. I thought that was pretty funny, real Joe Cruz, but I guess I kind of laid an egg with it. Okay, and then the fourth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 4 calling birds. And I explained that calling may very well mean, the original word may have been coley birds. And what color is coal?
Black, sir.
Yeah, so that could actually be 4 blackbirds, but the problem with blackbirds is the same as with turtle doves. And then on the 5th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 5 golden rings. Not exactly a girl's best friend, but they'll do. Just one issue that might crop up is who gets to keep these rings if the true love isn't quite as true as originally planned. Call a family lawyer. So if it's an engagement ring and the man, boy, I'm really behind times here. If it's an engagement ring, and I was thinking if a man gives a girl an engagement ring, boy, I'm just so far out of out of touch with the way the world operates now. So if they give them an engagement ring as a preface to a marriage, and the marriage falls through, they don't get married, which one of them gets to keep the ring? Does the donor get the ring back, or does the donee get to keep the ring? So that's the problem with 5 golden rings. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to come back to 6 geese a-laying. And we're working right on up through the 12 days of Christmas. Okay, next one here. Johnson versus Tall Tales. Real Joe Cruz. Yeah, Real Joe Cruz, they're coming for me. Yeah. During the impeachment hearing, Johnson began to harangue Trump for something horrible. Okay, so Congressman Johnson began to harangue Trump for something horrible. You know what it was?
No, I don't.
Being taller than Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Yeah. Johnson claimed that Trump was taller than Zelensky and his chair was bigger than Zelensky's, so that was somehow intimidating and contributed to an imbalance of power. So, I don't know, maybe I should start a little group called the Popular Front for the Liberation of Tall People. Because if you are tall, and what's the name of the program, Real Joe Cruz?
Tall Tales.
Yeah, we didn't just pick that name out of the air. If you are tall, and you're taller than most of the people that you run into on a daily basis, are you going to run the risk of intimidating everyone that you talk to because you're taller than them? Apparently, that's what Congressman Johnson thinks. So, I don't know. I got to rethink this. Maybe we'll have to change the name of the program. Instead of calling it Tall Tales, call it Short Takes. And you and I may have to swap roles, Real Joe Cruz. I may have to become the producer, and you may have to become the host. Because you're not as tall as I am.
That's true, sir.
Yeah. And with that cult of personality that you've been developing ever since we started Tall Tales here, I have a feeling you probably... Did you put Johnson up to this?
No, I didn't, sir. No. No.
All right. So Johnson is a senator from a representative from the 4th District of Georgia. So maybe I'd be okay if I just don't go to the state of Georgia. Maybe I'd be all right if I stay here on Guam. Now, this isn't the first time that Johnson has distinguished himself. His first name is Hank. And he first came on our radar when he opined that sending the Marines to Guam might not be such a good idea. Now, do you think that's because he was like a pacifist or had some deep foreign policy convictions, Real Joe Cruz? That wasn't it. The reason that he thought it might be a problem was because sending the Marines to Guam, there might be too many people on the island and it might capsize. It might just tip over. Yeah, it was that Hank Johnson that came out foursquare against tall people. So I don't know. I suppose the next thing he'll do is introduce legislation banning well, I guess basketball would be all right. If you had a height test, nobody over 5'9" should be able to play professional basketball. Kind of the Spud Webb rule. Okay. So, short break here. Then I'm coming back to Lou Leon Guerrero versus Brennan's.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So, next item on the calendar, Lou versus the Brennans. Connie Jo Shinohara has left the Port Authority of Guam, and Adelup on Friday announced that Luis Rivera Baza, a former Civil Service Commission executive director, replaced her as deputy director. General Manager Rory said Shinohara resigned from her job, which pays $134,134 base salary, for personal reasons. Shinohara's resignation is the second in the last few weeks. Brennan's sister, Samantha Brennan, resigned on November 22 from the director position at the Department of Corrections. Now, there's nothing in the news release here about the former director of the CIA, John Brennan, but I wouldn't be surprised if Rory asked the Port Authority Board of Directors to adopt a resolution calling for John Brennan or declaring that John Brennan is persona non grata on Guam, because it seems to be the in group versus the Brennans. So the governor's office said that Connie Jo Shinohara, Connie Jo Brennan Shinohara is a trusted friend and true professional. She was instrumental in the transition of our administration. We are thankful for her hard work and her commitment to the people of Guam. And by the way, we just happened to have a guy waiting in the closet so that when she came up and handed in her resignation, this guy opened the closet and jumped out and said, "Here I am. Surprise, surprise, here I am." And that was Luis Rivera Baza. So it wasn't necessary to go out and conduct a search to find Baza or to appoint an acting deputy general manager, because the ink was hardly dry on Shinohara's resignation when Brennan, when Baza just popped up, said, "Here I am, here I am." Now, are we talking coincidence here? Are we talking causation or coincidence? Could it be that Lou had, for some reason, wanted to give Baza that $134,000 job? And in order to do that, Shinohara had to leave? I'd like to know. I'd like to know more about this. Anybody who wants to chime in on it, 888-8255, or you can always go to Facebook and post your comments. But it just seems that, so often, or put it this way, ordinarily, if someone is going to replace an office holder, a foundation is laid. The foundation, in this case, would have been We've been talking to Luis Baza about coming to work at the port, and it's really kind of timely because Connie Shinohara is looking at leaving for personal reasons. So, the first one precedes the second by a couple of weeks. Not this time, though. Shinohara says, I quit. And Rory says to Baza, you're hired. Bang, bang. No, I may be overly suspicious. I doubt it. But this just sort of looks kind of strange, especially when we consider Rory's activities since he's taken over at the port. Now, you remember I have stuck Rory with the nickname the Settler. And that, I don't use that in the pejorative sense that the separatists here on island do, the ones that want Guam to become independent, who would label anyone who comes from San Lago a settler. They come over here and settle on an island that's not theirs. That's not what I mean as far as Rory's concerned. Rory seems to have a penchant for settling cases. You'll recall at his first board meeting, he announced that he had talked with Champ Calvo about settling the YTK case. It didn't sit very well with the commissioners. One of the commissioners, Oscar Calvo, asked that Rory quit. Get out of there. Because Rory didn't have the authorization to enter into those conversations. Rory also said that we got to get rid of Mike Phillips and bring in inside counsel. This is at the first meeting. And then he also said that he had created a task force to examine the pending disciplinary actions against what are known as the Port Seven. 7 people that got fired by the previous administration dealing with a allegedly fraudulent claim made by Bernadette Stern. So 7 people were fired. The cases are still bouncing around between the Civil Service Commission, Superior Court, Supreme Court, etc. Rory indicated that he thought that, that justice should be done here instead of this horsing around with the port constantly keeping these matters in litigation. And Rory's idea to settle it was to create a task force to evaluate the Port 7 terminations and report their findings, or report its findings. I guess it's report their findings back to the board. Now, guess who the chairperson of that task force was to be? Connie Jo Brennan Shinohara. She was going to conduct the task force. Well, I don't know if she did or not, but we haven't heard a peep out of her or her task force. And it's just my evaluation, just speculation. I didn't even look at my crystal ball for this one, but it just seemed that Rory was really, really anxious to get the Port 7 back on the payroll and maybe pony up several $1 million in back pay. And, so that's, that was my suspicion when what I'm going to refer to as the Shinohara Task Force was appointed. But the Shinohara Task Force hasn't produced anything. Is there a relation between Baza replacing Shinohara and the failure of the Shinohara Task Force? I don't know, but I'm going to keep watching it. All right, let's see what's next on the calendar here. I've got Lee Weber versus the Gods and Arrows. I hope. Yeah, here it is. This Gods and Arrows file is getting so thick. It's almost a program all by itself. Well, Lee Weber is a colonist. Yeah, he's that too. He's a columnist for the Post. He used to run a column for the Daily News. At one time, he was the publisher of the Daily News. He's lived on the island for a long, long time, over 50 years. And in my estimation, he's one of the assets for our island. He's really checked out on what goes on Guam, and he is not afraid to, if the ball is over the plate between the letters and the knees, Lee will call it a strike every single time, regardless of who the batter is or who the pitcher is. And here's what he says. He said in today's today's Post, his column, 4 days from now, the phrase, quote, "Who's your Godzu?" might get you questioned by federal authorities asking what or who it is you're speaking about. Yeah, so the word Godzu, let me define Godzu here just for those who may not know what I'm talking about, which is not an unusual phenomenon here on Tall Tales, right, Real Joe Cruz? A little louder, please.
No.
That people don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so Godzu is the word for, Chamorro word for rooster. Comes from the Spanish word Gallo, which could be pronounced gallo, right? Or in some idiolects, it could be Godzu. But so a Godzu is a rooster, and one who fights a rooster is a Godzinero, again from the Spanish. So if you say, who's your Godzu in Guam, it could have two meanings, actually. Because you could be talking in a political dialect where your candidate is known as your Godzu, because your candidate goes on and takes the other candidate on head-to-head, face-to-face, just like the roosters do at a cockfight. So Lee starts out with a clever line. From now on, 4 days from now, the phrase, "Who's your Godzu?" might get you questioned by federal authorities asking what or who it is you're speaking about. The upcoming federal ban on cockfighting has taken on a life of its own. And I suppose I have to plead guilty to that myself, because I've spent a lot of time talking about it for a couple reasons. One, I think it's important. And number two, there are so many facets to it, so many different ways of looking at it. As an example, I think it's barbaric, and it will not break my heart if it stops. On the other hand, criminal laws should be a function of local governments. It should be, if we're going to have criminal laws, they should be made in the 50 states and by extrapolation in the territories of the United States. It shouldn't be a large parliamentary body sitting in the District of Columbia that makes criminal laws for us when they really have very little opportunity to know what it is they're doing and what the consequences are. That's why the principle of subsidiarity is so important in government. Bump every decision down to the lowest level that can handle it. And that's why one of the strengths of the United States is that we have 50 states, so that what might be illegal in Utah is not only legal but encouraged right across the state line in Nevada. Talking about gambling. Of course, the left wants to blur that distinction. The left would like to see a national government instead of a federal government, where all the power is in the national government, in their hands, and the states become 50 administrative districts. So, just on the subject of cockfighting, I think there are strong arguments to be made on at least two facets of the phenomenon. But as Weber says, the upcoming federal ban on cockfighting has taken on a life of its own. There are those who claim it's part of the local culture. But I see that in the same light as I see spearfishing with scuba tanks as being part of the local fishing culture. Neither is truly part of the culture, but rather both have been borrowed from others. According to Jay Merrill, president of Market Research and Development, a recent survey shows 60% of Guamanians favor a ban on cockfighting. 9 of 10 Guamanians are concerned about the mistreatment of animals. 90% believe animal cruelty laws on Guam should be strengthened. And when it comes to the federal ban on cockfighting, 60% favor the ban and only 25% oppose it. And I have to go into a couple of other things here that I've just brought up here for today's program. I have a story that Kevin Kerrigan, late of the station, wrote back in 2018. No valid cockfighting licenses have been issued to anyone on Guam, and the Department of Revenue and Taxation does not send collection agents to any of the unlicensed cockfights routinely held around the island. There is no valid cockfighting licenses right now, said Cockpit License Board Chairman Earl Garrido, because there has not been a cockpit board for more than 10 years. You know, it's part of the culture. You know, it's so deeply ingrained in the culture that seats on the cockpit licensing board are hotly contested. You know, people petition the governor, beg the governor on bended knee, please, governor, put me on the cockpit licensing board. I've been a cockfighter ever since, and I want to make sure that cockfighting is properly regulated here on the island. Is that the way it works? No. Nobody cares. No cockpit licensing board for 10 years, no licenses. Nobody from RevTax went out to collect the taxes. So what we have here, it appears, is something that just goes along, slipping through the cracks. And now we're faced with this idea that it's part of the culture, but the numbers just don't bear that out. And Weber goes on to say, those are very strong numbers that elected officials should be paying very close attention to as this effort moves forward. Additionally, once the ban takes full effect, those who sponsor or exhibit birds in a cockfight face a fine and a maximum prison term of 5 years. Attending a cockfight would be punishable by a fine and up to 1 year in prison. So, you know, we hear the smart money here. Yeah, I'll let them send somebody out here to enforce it. And it's just people aren't going to stop. It's just going to go underground. People are still going to keep on doing it. Well, it's kind of like the Clint Eastwood was it a movie, Dirty Harry? You know, if you want to go to a cockfight, if you just want to go and watch, understand that it could cost you a year in jail and a $5,000 fine. So there ought to be an animated statue of Clint at the edge of every one of these underground cockfights with a motion detector so that when a person walks past it, it says, "Do you feel lucky, punk?" Well, do you? Yeah. So, you know, you run that risk. And I've explained before the possibilities, you know, and we talk, and the question, who are they going to, they're going to send somebody out here from Washington to enforce? No. The people who can enforce it are already here. And the United States Attorney for Guam has made no bones about the fact that he will enforce the law. Okay, well, let's take a short break here, and I'll come back and wind up Lee Weber versus cockfighting before the big halftime show that you've all been looking forward to.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami.
My Big Hot Pastrami?
No, my Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Yeah, so I have a story here that ran in PNC the other night. Late this afternoon, U.S. Attorney Sean Anderson issued a statement saying Congress has effectively criminalized every aspect of the animal fighting industry nationwide. Beyond criminal enforcement of this new provision, our office may also seek civil forfeiture of any property involved in or facilitating such an offense. The public should know that our office will make every effort to pursue violations of this statute within the available resources of the Department of Justice, Anderson said. So you want to have a cockfight out on your ranch? Well, you may, you do that, and you may save some money the next year because you may not owe any property tax on the ranch. One of the collateral benefits of cockfighting here. So the Department of Justice, that's the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that's the Drug Enforcement Administration, and I've already hypothesized that since cockfights are places where large unaccounted amounts of cash change hands, would make a good place for a drug market. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that the FBI and or the DEA might conduct a raid. So since they've got a real easy case to make on the cockfighting part, and the money laundering and drug stuff would be kind of like a collateral benefit. So I can tell you this, everyone, it's a free country. We all have free will. We can all do what it is that we want. You won't see me at a cockfight after the 20th of December. That's for doggone sure. Lee Weber goes on to say, unfortunately, according to a recent story in this newspaper, Governor Lulian Guerrero will not be enforcing the ban, according to Carlo Branch, the governor's policy director. Actually, Carlo Branch has now become the governor's spokesman. Sorry, Janella. Sorry, Crystal. But Carlo has kind of elbowed you guys out of the picture. And then Weber goes on to say, well, of course not. She doesn't, quote, enforce any federal laws. Yeah, to say, oh, I'm not going to enforce that law. It's like she's not going to enforce the federal purity and brake fluid law either, because it's not her job. And then Lee doesn't mention it in his column, but although she said she's not going to enforce it, she did call the mayors in and say, sorry, fellas, no more cockfights at village fiestas. I'm not going to issue any permits because it's against the federal law. Not wanting to, challenge the law with a smoking gun in her hand, which is exactly what she would have if she approved cockfights, a cockfighting permit after December 20. And then one of our friends here is really kind of caught in a bind. That would be the territorial veterinarian, Dr. Tom Poole, who approves the importation of animals to the island. So what position is he in when a person asks for a permit to import cocks, meaning male male chickens. Maybe fighting cocks, maybe not. If he approves the permit, is he complicit? Is he in violation of that federal law? And I've gotten on this before. Instead of all of the posturing like Amanda Shelton, we're going to make this the lowest priority for government of Guam, my resolution. Instead of that, and the posturing and pandering that our other government officials have been engaged in, what they should have been doing for the last year, they should have been answering questions like the one Tom Poole raised. If this is against federal law, what adjustments do we have to make in our own operations so as not to put our own people at risk? But it's a whole lot more fun to sit over in the corner and say, "Oh, the federal government. Yeah, we've been cockfights. It's part of our culture. How dare they?" Okay. Weber says, "I'm not sure what, if any, federal penalty there may be for those elected, appointed, or sworn officials who knowingly choose to ignore the law and willfully know of and do not report such activity." Kind of sounds like what's called misprision of a felony. Maybe not. And then Lee says, "One wonders if it's akin to not robbing the bank, but knowingly driving the getaway car." And he goes on to say, "Personally, I have never attended a cockfight in the 52 years that I lived on Guam. That said, there was a time when one of my friends was showing me how he trained the birds he used in cockfights. As a young boy on my uncle's farm, I have vivid memories of getting attacked by roosters in the farmyard. They were aggressive little buggers. I have never been a fan of fighting any animals, 2 or 4-legged, against one another so people could sit back, watch, and bet money on the outcome. It reminded me of the days in Rome when 4-legged animals were fought against humans, and also humans against humans until the death of one or both." Yeah. Throwing the gladiators to the lions. Blood sports have always been at the bottom of my list of favorite things to attend for entertainment or profit. Well, I'll come back and wrap this up after the big halftime show. And then the next item on the card is Weir versus the American Samoan government.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Ready to vote. I'm Jessica Stone, Fox News. The full House of Representatives preparing to vote on 2 articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump. House Intelligence Committee Chairman and Democratic Representative Adam Schiff on Fox News Sunday.
Most pernicious, his use of his office, his abuse of his power to attempt to get an ally to help him cheat in the next election, sacrificing our national security, undermining the integrity of our elections.
Democratic New Jersey Congressman Jeff Van Drew says he won't support impeachment. He's widely expected to switch parties. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy tells Fox Van Drew is more than welcome.
I want to tell Jeff Van Drew that he is welcome in the Republican Party, not just by me, but by our conference, and we would support him, and we would welcome him to join.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, meantime, wanting Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to call 4 witnesses who never appeared in the House in the expected Senate impeachment trial. They include the former National Security Advisor and current acting White House Chief of Staff. McConnell has indicated he's leaning towards a short trial without witnesses. Former FBI Director James Comey saying he was wrong to defend the FBI's efforts to obtain a FISA warrant to monitor President Trump's foreign campaign advisor, Carter Page. The Justice Department Inspector General found 17 errors in the investigation.
You make it sound like you're a bystander, an eyewitness. You were the director of the FBI while a lot of this was going on, sir.
Sure. I'm responsible for that. That's why I'm telling you I was wrong. I was overconfident as director in our procedures.
Comey appeared on Fox News Sunday, and so did White House advisor Pam Bondi.
He says that his people did nothing wrong, and first of all, he was the leader. He was the one charged with briefing the president when in fact he was spying on the president. That guy needs a lawyer, by the way.
America is listening to Fox News.
Did you know that home loan rates have plunged again? Would you like to take advantage of these lower rates to help lower your monthly payments? Refinancing doesn't have to be for another 30 years. It can be for 10, 15, or 20 years. It's up to you. Reduce your monthly payments. Pay off your loan earlier. At Bank Pacific, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Credit conditions apply.
I'm a working mom and could really use more hours in my day. Thankfully, my non-electric Kinetico water treatment system has simplified my life. It's easier to clean my home with Kinetico conditioned water. No more scrubbing tubs or wiping water spots. Cleaners work better and last longer. And all the Kinetico drinking water we want is right here. No more lugging home bottled water. All this, and I'm saving money too, thanks to Kinetico.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
As an investigation continues into the deadly shootout last week in Jersey City, New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy delivered a message of solidarity at one of the city's black churches. More from Fox's Gernal Scott.
Governor Murphy says Jersey City saw the worst kind of evil last Tuesday.
An evil spurred by deep-seated hate, and it took with it the lives of 4 innocent and wonderful people.
3 civilians and a police officer were killed by the 2 shooters who may have had ties to a hate group. Murphy told the congregation the community has to band together.
We are all the sons and daughters of God. When one of us comes under attack, we all come under attack.
The investigation has led to an arrest Saturday of a man whose contact number was found on one of the attackers. The man was charged with having a weapon illegally. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Dozens of U.S. Navy pilots have written a letter demanding Capitol Hill lawmakers and top military brass allow more pilots to carry arms on bases. Fox's Lucas Tomlinson reports from Washington.
In the letter obtained by Fox News, Navy pilots write, quote, "It is reprehensible that a military installation, much less its warfighters based there, be at the mercy of off-base civilian law enforcement when faced with an immediate threat to their lives." The pilots say military bases across the United States have become, quote, soft targets in the wake of the Pensacola shooting by a Saudi officer. One of the 3 victims was a recent Naval Academy graduate. The letter points out the irony, quote, "Ensign Joshua Caleb Watson was a small arms instructor and captain of the rifle team at the United States Naval Academy. Yet when charged with standing the watch, he was equipped with nothing more than a logbook and a pen." In Washington, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
And tear gas returning to the streets of Hong Kong as the city-state's leader meets with top Communist Party officials. I'm Jessica Stone, Fox News.
Cocoa Coffee Company is now available at Circle K. Single-origin coffee beans carefully sourced and locally roasted to give you the freshest cup of coffee Guam has to offer. Grab a cup that's brewed every 30 minutes or purchase a bag of the locally roasted whole beans. Flavors now serving: light medium roasted Ethiopia and medium dark roasted Jamaican Blue Mountain. Exclusively available at Circle K. With every Cocoa Coffee Company purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go towards the Cocoa Recovery Program.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Is it possible that being a bit of an outsider could have benefits for the individual and the organization he or she works for? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, some thoughts about being on the outside looking in.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
I know everybody out there enjoyed that inspiring halftime show, the cheerleaders, the marching bands, the drill teams, the synchronized card section up on the grandstand. But the show's over, and now we launch into the second half of Tall Tales. I'm just going to spend a minute here on cockfighting, and then we're going to go to Neil Weir versus the government of American Samoa. So Weber goes on to say, blood sports have always been at the bottom of my list of favorite things to attend for entertainment or profit. The larger the animal, the bloodier and more gruesome the activity. Cockfighting, in my mind, and apparently 60% of Guamanians' minds, if the survey is correct, is something that Guam can certainly live without. In fact, another angle to this sport is the opportunity it provides local criminals to launder dirty money. Drug dealers and fences need a place to turn dirty money into clean money, and betting and winning at the cockfights provides a way of doing it. So by banning cockfighting, you are not only canceling out another blood sport, you're also closing down another pathway for turning dirty money, money derived from criminal activity, into clean, openly spendable money. So that's all I'm going to say about cockfighting today. I don't have any plans on talking about cockfighting tomorrow, but I suspect I will, because probably something will pop up that requires my comment on the subject. And you know how duty-bound I feel about commenting on those things that seem to require my comments. I'm just peeking at some of the Facebook posts here, and I got one here from, I can't tell who just yet. USA, the good conquistadors. It's better to have the USA conquer your land because they are superior and everyone else is inferior. Yeah, I keep hearing that a lot, you know. I see that as kind of a throwaway line. I don't know whose line it is. Oh yeah, Jesse Lemtiaco. Who else? Okay, so I got a call on line one. Oh, Jimmy. Did I tell you to open the Jimmy line?
No.
You opened the Jimmy line sua sponte, huh?
Yes.
On your own motion. Hi, Jimmy.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, here I am, Jimmy. Big as life, twice as ugly.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this cockfighting. And you know, it seems like the main justification for it is that it's part of the culture.
Uh-huh.
Just because something is part of a region's culture does not necessarily make it a good thing. Okay, it's in Africa. Female circumcision is part of their culture. In China, foot binding of the women is part of their culture, was, for hundreds of years. In India, sati has been part of their culture for thousands of years. But just because something is part of their culture, you know, most of those places in Africa, I think female circumcision is illegal now. And in India, sati in the caste system is illegal now.
Explain to our international radio listening audience what sati was, would you, Jimmy?
Well, it's been, when the husband dies and they burn him, and the widow is supposed to jump on the fire and get burned as well.
So she's burned alive as part of her husband's passage, right?
Yes, if she's a good Hindu.
Mm-hmm.
But that's illegal, but they still do it. And slavery. For thousands of years, slavery has been part of various civilizations' culture. But that doesn't make it a good thing. It doesn't make it right. And in most, a lot of, in China, they don't do female foot binding. In Africa, female circumcision is illegal. In India, the sati and the caste system is illegal. And in most of the world, slavery has been abolished. But for thousands of years, slavery was part of the culture. That was a cultural norm. That was seen as okay.
So I think what you're saying, Jimmy, is that when we're talking about a particular practice and determine that it's part of the culture, that isn't necessarily the end of the discussion, correct?
It's not the measure of right and wrong. The chicken fighting, just because it's part of your culture, doesn't make it a good thing.
Very good, Jimmy. That's very, very poignant. Thank you very much for laying that out for us. I think you're 100% right. Thank you.
Anyway, it won't bother you anymore.
No, you can bother me like that anytime. That was a very clear statement of how to deal with cultural practices. I guess it would be a several-step process. First of all, when someone comes along with that argument, oh, you can't do that because that's part of our culture. The first step, is it really part of the culture? And then the second step, if it is, that can't be the determiner of whether it's right or wrong. That something could be part of the culture and be dead wrong, as per Jimmy's examples. Could be right, could be wrong, but just mumbling the C word, culture, doesn't necessarily mean that you've got a slam dunk win of the argument. Thank you, Jimmy. I'm looking at another. I was looking at something. It actually relates to what we're going to be talking about in a minute. Okay, so much for cockfighting. Let's go to Weir versus the government of American Samoa. Over the weekend, and by the way, I think it was really interesting that so far no local media element has broken this story about American Samoans and citizenship, and it's an extremely important story for the whole country. It's certainly important for anyone who is a Samoan. And it's also very important for anyone who lives in a territory of the United States. So the story broke this morning on the Ray Gibson Show, and I'll have to say that I was first alerted to it by a member of the Tall Tales team here, Real Joe Cruz.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Real Joe Cruz sent me a link to a story in Slate. So very good, Real Joe Cruz. Just goes to show you that it's not easy being the producer of Tall Tales. The Real Joe Cruz can do it. He could probably do it with half his brain tied behind his back. But it's not for amateurs. Okay, so the name of the case is, it's a Samoan name, so it's got more consonants. It's the opposite of a Polish name. It's got more vowels and consonants, right? It's Fiti Samanu versus the United States. So 3 people who were born in American Samoa, who are now living in Utah, brought suit against the United States, asking, among other things, that they be declared citizens of the United States. The government of American Samoa filed a motion for intervention on the side of the Samoans? No. On the side of the United States, on the side of the defendants, because the government of American Samoa opposed Fitissimanu and the other 2 plaintiffs who wanted the court to declare that they were citizens of the United States by birth. So, as I said, it's a really interesting question. I think we could talk for a minute about what the decision, this is what the decision finally held. The decision held that persons born in American Samoa are citizens of the United States by virtue of the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment. 8 U.S.C. Section 1408(1) is unconstitutional, both on its face and as applied to plaintiffs. B, the court enjoins defendants from enforcing 8 U.S.C. 1408, parenthesis 1, defendants shall not imprint endorsement code 9 in plaintiffs' passports. Defendants shall issue new passports to plaintiffs that do not disclaim their U.S. citizenship. Now, this is what the United States Code said about those born in American Samoa. Said they were, although they were born in a place where the American flag flies, they were not United States citizens at birth, such as people born in Guam are. It said that people born in American Samoa were nationals, but not citizens. And Code 9, the Code 9 endorsement would say the bearer of this passport is a U.S. national, not a United States citizen. So the court said you can't do that anymore. It also said any State Department policy that provides that citizenship provisions of the Constitution do not apply to persons born in American Samoa violates the 14th Amendment. Defendants are enjoined from enforcing any Department of State Foreign Affairs manual provision that provides that the citizenship provisions of the Constitution do not apply to persons born in American Samoa. Defendants' practice and policy of enforcing 8 U.S.C. 1408 through imprinting endorsement code 09 in the passports of persons born in American Samoa is contrary to constitutional right and not in accordance with law. Pursuant to 5 U.S.C. 706(2), defendants are enjoined from further enforcement of that practice and policy. Now, that's the law. Since the United States was the defendant, and since that order applied to the United States, that law applies everywhere, not just in Utah, but everywhere. Now, footnote here, the judge who signed that order, who has a name that's as difficult to pronounce as though he were a Samoan himself, his name is Clark Waldoops. So the Judge Waldoops, who signed this order, ordering the American Samoans or citizens, stayed his own order a little later on in the same day or maybe the next day. So although the order affects the entire United States, it won't be carried into effect right now. We've talked about this a little bit before, and you may remember when a district court judge in Hawaii ordered that, entered an order ordering that President Trump's ban of visas for people from 7 Middle Eastern countries was unconstitutional and therefore enjoined. And 6 of the 7 Middle East countries had Muslim majorities. So the press cast this as Trump's anti-Muslim order. and the district court in Hawaii enjoined it. And after that, the Attorney General of the United States, Sessions, what was his first name? Sessions.
Jeff?
Yeah. Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions, yeah. Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions said, you know, it's a hell of a note when the President of the United States, acting within the scope of his authority, issues an order about visas and some judge out on some island in the Pacific overrules him. Well, the people in Hawaii just rose up in righteous indignation over that. Doesn't he know that Hawaii's a state? And, of course, that was not the gravamen of his objection. The gravamen of his objection is the nationwide injunction. If the United States is a defendant, a single district court judge, there are 93 districts in the United States, a single district court judge can stop the whole U.S. government in its tracks. And that's what happened here, except that Waldoop stayed his own order. The reason he stayed his order is that it's pretty much a sure thing that the United States will take an appeal to the 10th Circuit, which has appellate jurisdiction over district courts in Utah. And I suspect that the government of American Samoa will take an appeal of Waldoop's order dismissing their petition to intervene. So in order to minimize the chaos here, the case is stayed. So it's going to take a while for this to percolate up to the 10th Circuit and for the 10th Circuit to decide. Now, I was going to mention what this decision doesn't do. It's not limited just to Utah. It's a nationwide order if the stay is ever lifted. It does not have any impact on the insular cases, the chief of which are Downs versus Bidwell and Balzac versus Puerto Rico, which is where the doctrine of incorporation came from. And it's one that everybody wants to talk about. It seems that the amount of time people want to spend talking about it is inversely proportionate to the amount of time they spend reading the case, because people are saying, well, the insular cases, and they don't know what they're talking about. But Judge Waldoop was able to harmonize this case with the insular, with Downs versus Bidwell. And it makes a whole lot of sense. And what Judge Waldoop says is that his decision turns on the first sentence of the 14th Amendment. Downs versus Bidwell turns on Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. Downs says that the uniformity clause of the United States Constitution did not apply to the newly acquired territories. That's all it says. You know, notwithstanding Ann Hattori's propaganda reading on last week, tonight, that was just dead wrong. It is basically a taxation and tariffs case, and it says that the uniformity clause of the Constitution doesn't apply in the newly acquired territories. Doesn't say anything about the civil rights or political status of people living in those territories. So here's how the decision turns. I have Section 1 of the 14th Amendment in front of me, and this is how it reads. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So I think it's fair to say that you could read that sentence in two different ways. First of all, if you were born in one of the 50 states, you are a citizen of the United States and in the state in which you were born. Since since the two clauses there are joined by a coordinating conjunction. The other way to read it is all persons born in the United States are, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States, period. And, oh, by the way, they're also citizens of the state where they reside. So it's not a masterpiece of clear draftsmanship. A couple more words could have made it a lot clearer. But Judge Waldup reads it that all persons born or naturalized in the United States. He stops reading right there and feels it's not necessary to go into the part about state citizenship. So he says that born in the United States means born anywhere where the United States exercised its sovereign power. Okay, so that would be any one of the states. It would be the District of Columbia, and it would be any one of the territories. I forgot to look up how many territories the United States had in 1868 when the 14th Amendment was adopted, but I have a feeling it was probably in the high teens or maybe 20 territories. So for an awful long part of the United States history, the United States was made up of states and territories. As you'll recall, that there's a section in the Constitution that talks about admitting new states. So, and parenthetically, the United States had territories before it had a constitution. The Northwest Territory Ordinance was adopted by the Continental Congress before we even had a constitution. So the idea was that as the United States expanded across the Appalachians and acquired more territory, more land, that land would be set up as territories with its own local government, governor appointed by the president, etc. And after it reached a certain population, adopted a constitution, etc., it could be incorporated into the states. It would become one of the United States. So there were, a couple things that didn't seem to fit very well. For instance, when California was conquered, when the Mexican War ended and California came under the American flag, between California and the other states, there was basically nothing but wide open spaces. So the question was, could a state that's not contiguous to other of the states, or excuse me, could a territory that's not contiguous with any state become a state itself? And the answer was yes, California. And then we had Alaska. Could a territory that does not, that shares no border with any other part of the United States become a state? Because you got to go through Canada. If you're driving, you got to drive through Canada to get to Alaska. And the answer to that question was yep. And then could an island a couple thousand miles off the coast of the rest of the country, could that island become a state? Answer was yes, Hawaii. But as far as the territories acquired in the Spanish-American War, rather than becoming what we used to refer to as continental territories, in the beginning, they were possessions. Now I can hear the drumbeat of the... Can I?
What's that, sir?
I thought I could hear the drumbeat of the seventh inning stretch in the background. Maybe I'm imagining.
Oh,
things.
no, it's not yet, sir. It's about now.
Yeah, okay.
The holiday season is here, and it gives us pause to reflect on the abundance of 2019 and to express our gratitude for Guam, the island we call home, and to all Guamanians. Our team here at Security Title is proud of the work we do to support ourselves and our families, to serve and care for our customers, and to give back to our community. May this season of joy and the new year bring happiness, good health, and prosperity to you and yours. Merry Christmas from all of us at Security Title.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try their featured special for December. Seafood Lao Lao, a medley of salmon, shrimp, scallops, and fresh spinach wrapped in tea leaves, steamed to order, topped with soy butter sauce and your choice of starch. Visit Mescla in Agotna and now in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
Seventh inning stretch, center field bleachers, Wrigley Field, part of the United States for sure. One of the 50. Is Illinois really a state?
I think so.
Yeah. You know, I grew up about 75 miles from downtown Chicago in the great and sovereign state of Wisconsin, I live, you know.
Nice.
Yeah, and according to what we found out, kids in Chicago, you know, kids play cops and robbers. It's something the kids play, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Except in Chicago. In Chicago, the kids played cops and or robbers. Anyhow, so when the United States prevailed in the Spanish-American War and took title to the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam as prizes of war, there were no promises made in the peace treaties as there were with the treaties with France and Mexico concerning the ends of, concerning the Louisiana Purchase and the southwestern United States, where in the treaties the United States committed to making the residents of those territories, putting them on a par with citizens of the United States. In the Treaty of Spain that ended the Spanish-American War, the United States promised that it would speak to the political status and civil rights of the people in those territories and their political status, which the United States did. Now, as far as Guam is concerned, Guam was not a territory. It wasn't even a colony for 52 years. Guam was a possession, and the law of nations is that during active combat, the military authorities are basically the government of the territory. After the hostilities are over and before a peace treaty is drawn, then the President of the United States would be the government of conquered territories. Since and in the case of Guam, President McKinley just assigned Guam to the Navy and washed his hands of it and walked away. Nothing else. Puerto Rico, Congress adopted an organic act for Puerto Rico called the Foraker Act. And it was an interpretation of the Foraker Act that caused the Supreme Court to decide Downs versus Bidwell, saying that a special tariff could be applied to goods coming in from Puerto Rico pursuant to the Foraker Act, although that provision was not in accord with the uniformity clause of the U.S. Constitution. It's all pretty complicated, isn't it? But the bottom line is that Judge Waldup said there's no inconsistency in finding that people born in a territory where the U.S. flag flies, where the U.S. exercises sovereignty, are birthright citizens, even though the uniformity clause of the United States Constitution does not apply in those territories. So anybody who was thinking, oh boy, this is the insular cases, no. So Judge Waldup said that born in the United States means that if the United States exercised sovereignty over territory where someone was born, that person was a United States citizen at birth. And it's a very interesting decision, a very educational decision, in my eyes, a very well-written decision, because Judge Waldup goes all the way back to English history to examine the phenomenon of citizenship. You know, the United States Constitution, before the 14th Amendment, didn't say anything about citizenship, didn't say who is or how you get to be or et cetera. The only thing it said was you got to be a natural-born citizen to be president, and Congress could provide uniform rules for naturalization, and that was it. One of the first things that Congress did was to enact a Naturalization Act of something like 1793 or something. But the way our system is set up, the United States follows jus soli. In other words, law of the soil, not jus sanguinis, law of the blood. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say that two Americans whose descendants came to the United States on the Mayflower, and they're married, and they go to Tijuana for a night on the town, and the wife is very mapotgi, and all of a sudden she feels like she has to give birth. There isn't time to get her back to across the border to San Diego to a hospital. So they call 911 and
You've got great Spanish, sir.
Bueno. So an ambulance comes squealing up, and they load the lady in the ambulance, and they take her to the hospital in Tijuana. And she gives birth to a bouncing baby boy, which, for the purposes of this story, she's going to name Roberto, or perhaps Beto. Okay, so what is the citizenship of that baby boy, and why? Well, he is not a citizen by birth. He is a citizen. He is a statutory citizen because the United States laws say that someone born abroad of American parents is a citizen. If it weren't for that statute, the little shaver, is not going to be the American citizen. I don't know. I suppose they'd give him a pass when they brought him across the border in a baby buggy, but he's only an American citizen because of the statute. Because the United States follows jus sanguinis, as you were, jus soli, the law of the soil. Now, other countries like Japan, it's jus sanguinis. If you are Japanese, it doesn't matter where you're born, you're still Japanese. And if the husband and wife had gone to Tokyo instead of Tijuana, and the baby were born in, by the way, Real Joe Cruz, watashi wa nihongo wa karemasen. If the baby had been born in Tokyo, he would not be Japanese because he was born in Tokyo, because he's not Japanese. So Judge Waldup goes through that very carefully, and the reason is that interpretation is held that those who adopted the United States Constitution saw these provisions through the eyes conditioned by English common law, which was the law of the colonies at the time. So the United States, one way or the other, followed the law of jus soli until the 14th Amendment came along. Well, then when the Supreme Court, Mr. Justice Roger Taney, decided Dred Scott versus Sanford, he really threw a monkey wrench into it and said that if you're black, even if you're born in the United States, you are not a citizen of the United States. So the 14th Amendment was basically to overrule Taney's decision in Dred Scott. And given the fact that it is the product of a just as you were a just soli system, and says all persons born in the United States are citizens, Judge Waldup comes to the inescapable conclusion that if you were born in American Samoa, you have to be an American citizen by birth. Very interesting. And as I said, it's a well-written decision, a very interesting reading. And I would suspect that if any decision on this subject has a chance of standing, maybe this one will. Okay, so that's the decision. Now I'm going to get into what Peter J. Santos, one of my posters, says. One of the posters on Facebook, he says, Bob, Neil Weir is committing saviorism, unknowingly undermining and destroying a group of people without advising or getting consent. A modern-day Salvatoris. Well, I'm going to come back to that and talk a little bit about how the people from American Samoa may feel about this and why American Samoa intervened in the case on the side of the defendant, the United States, saying, we don't need no stinking American citizenship. But before I do that, I think I'll just hypothesize for a moment and ask, what would happen if this decision sticks? And here's how it could stick. The United States and the government of America and Samoa will take appeal to the 10th Circuit. The 10th Circuit may very well sustain Judge Waldup's decision. They may say, yes, that is the law. The 14th, that is the proper reading of the first sentence of the 14th Amendment. Your decision is correct, Judge. Now, if that happens, it is in opposition to another American Samoa decision decided in the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. Weir brought another case similar to this one on behalf of someone named, I pronounce it Tuwawo, but I'm probably mispronouncing it wrong. It's, one consonant and 17 vowels, so I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly. But in that case, a district judge in the District of Columbia ruled against the plaintiffs, and the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia affirmed the district court decision. One of the ratio decidendi was the fact that the government of American Samoa opposed the remedy that the plaintiffs sought. So you've got one circuit that says, no, you're not, the 14th Amendment does not make you a birthright citizen. And if the 10th upholds Waldup, you'll have one that says, yes, it does. So then we have two United States Circuit courts holding opposite views of what the law is. And what in the parlance of Supreme Court litigation, it would be said, the circuits are split. And this is one of the ways that cases get to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court likes to resolve conflicts caused by a split in the circuit. So the law, you wouldn't have a different law in the in the District of Columbia Circuit than you had in the 10th Circuit. So if the 10th Circuit upholds Waldup, it's very possible that this case could go before the United States Supreme Court. Now, we're not talking about next year here. We're talking about a relatively lengthy process. But when the case gets before the United States Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court is going to do one of two things. It's going to basically affirm Judge Waldup's reading or overrule it. Now, there are different ways that the Supreme Court could do it. It could do it, by ruling on a threshold factor or whatever. But let's just say that the United States Supreme Court says, yes, that the 14th Amendment since 1868 has held that anyone born where the in a land where the United States exercises sovereignty is a United States citizen by birth. Let's see what happens then. Well, one thing that happens is that people on Guam, my wife became a citizen 10 years earlier than what she thought, because she thought she became a citizen in 1950. But if this case is correct, if the Utah case is correct, when the doctor picked her up and she started to cry, she was a United States citizen, not because she cried, but because she was born in the United States for 14th Amendment purposes. Now, if that's the case, it kind of lets a little bit of the air out of this legal fiction that the separatists have been propounding, that because some people became citizens by virtue of the Organic Act, that they are then original inhabitants, and denoting them as original inhabitants is not a racist classification, because everyone born here would have been a citizen at the time that the Organic Act was adopted by Congress. And you'd have to look at the citizenship provisions of the Organic Act now as surplusage. So that's one of the things that could happen. It's not exactly earth-shaking, but here's something else. If Judge Waldup is correct, then everyone born in the Philippines, certainly between the time of the peace treaty with the Philippines and July the 4th, 1976, when the Philippines became independent, was born in the United States and was at that time a native-born citizen of the United States. So 1946 was a while ago. That's what, 70 years ago, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir. I remember it clearly.
Yeah. So there's plenty of people that were born in the Philippines before 1946 that are still ambulatory. And I suspect that some of the newspapers in the Philippines are saying, hey, you guys, pay attention. This thing is much more broad than what you thought it was when you saw the words American Samoa in the paper. Because a very strong argument could be made, if Judge Waldup is correct, that we have an awful lot of American citizens that we didn't even know about until now. And I suspect that this may be one of the reasons that the United States would oppose a finding that born in the United States means born where the United States exercise sovereignty, because it would be quite a chunk to say everyone who's still alive who was born in the Philippines before July 4, 1946 is now a United States citizen. As United States citizens, that means that they could come to the United States at will. No visas, no quotas, no visa waiver, or whatever. Now, the word, voting gets kicked around in this a lot. Well, then they could vote. But I've pointed this out before. Voting and citizenship are not cut from the same cloth. If you are a citizen, all of the states now, except California, require you to be a citizen to vote in state elections. But it hasn't always been that way, and it doesn't have to always be that way. I pointed out before that up through 1920, aliens voted for presidency of the United States. Didn't have to be a citizen. California has flirted with the idea of allowing non-citizens to vote for school boards and things like that. So being a United States citizen certainly clears the way for voting, but it does not ipso facto mean that you can vote. But it does mean that you can freely enter and leave the United States for a good reason, a bad reason, or no reason at all. And and it has some other ramifications. So I would think that this could be very interesting for people born in the Philippines. That's one of the interesting what ifs that arise from this. Okay, we're going to go down the home stretch here in a minute. I'm going to take some time and read some of the Facebook comments. And if I don't get into the American Samoan view of this today, I certainly will tomorrow.
A diamond ring turns into a black pearl and hangs shimmering in the sky.
Join 93.3 The Point for a spectacular celestial event. On the evening of December 26th, a rare solar eclipse will take place just before sunset.
We see the sun's atmosphere, normally not visible.
Most of the sun will be blocked during the eclipse, leaving only a ring of fire visible, and we have the best seats and the safest way to watch it.
It's one of the great wonders of the solar system.
Join us at the Point Coffee Lounge at the Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort from 4 to 6 p.m. on December 26th. The first 100 guests will receive a pair of Eclipse viewing glasses, a complimentary glass of iced tea, and a coupon good for discounts at Sheraton's Surfers Point Bar or La Cascada Buffet Restaurant. Join us for the Point's 2019 Eclipse Viewing Party, December 26th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the beautiful Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort. Brought to you in part by Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort, Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, and your Sky-watching friends at 93.3 The Point.
Talk Tells with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Call to the post. Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. That means we're entering the home stretch on Tall Tales. That means I got about 8 more minutes to go. And you can bank on that. In fact, you can bank Pacific on it. Okay, before I get into the Facebook comments, I'm going to take a call from Ed. Good afternoon, Ed.
Hi, Bob. How you doing?
Good.
All right. No, I was just curious, too, Bob, before 1946, if that's the case, would the so-called Philippines U.S. citizens, would they be eligible to run for president or, Congress or Senate?
Yes, because they would be native-born citizens, wouldn't they?
Okay, that's the case. And I have a question. Let's say, I was born here on Guam.
Uh-huh.
And I guess I'm a U.S. citizen because that's what it says.
Sure.
If I was born on Naval Hospital, would that make me eligible to run for Congress or President of the United States?
Born in Naval Hospital?
Yeah.
Just being born on Guam is enough, Ed. Being born in Naval Hospital might have something to do with the cigars that your father handed out after you were born, but he might have been able to buy them in the PX, but that'd be about it.
Okay, so I could just pick a residency in, let's say, Virginia, and then I could run as a governor or, a senator over there?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, Ed.
You have a good one.
Thank you.
Okay. Good show. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see. I've got one of my regular customers is back, Jesse Limtiaco. Jesse says, is it fair to say Guam cannot have its own constitution unless the U.S. Congress says we can? That's fair to say. And the U.S. Congress said back in 1977, the U.S. Congress said we could, and we still can. We could do it tomorrow. And in my mind, there's no reason that we shouldn't do it tomorrow because it lays the path for wherever we want to go. Jesse also says, Jesse later on made his conquistadors remark, the good conquistadors, it's better to have the USA conquer your land because they are superior and everyone else is inferior. It probably would have been better if instead of the United States, it would have been better maybe if the Germans had taken over Guam like they did other parts of Micronesia. Or maybe at the end of World War II, the United States should have just said, well, Japanese can stay. They're okay. Come on, Jesse, let's get serious here. Okay, then we got Jesse Limtiaco again, interested in hearing how the Philippines born in U.S. territory of the Philippines at the time may be on the same boat as American Samoans. I think I just mentioned that because the Philippines were under the sovereign authority of the United States up until 1946. Jesse says Filipino soldiers were promised U.S. citizenship at the time of World War II. I'm not sure if those promises were ever kept. I'm not sure if they were ever made, Jesse. I've done a lot of reading about World War II. And if that promise was made, I'm curious as to who made it and how it was made. And Jesse goes on to say, Trump said something about wanting to remove the 14th Amendment. No, I don't think so. What Trump has talked about is the phenomenon that if a person is here in the United States illegally and as a child, that child is a birthright citizen, even though his mother may have just snuck under the fence 2 minutes before he was born. Trump wants to do away with that, but that's got nothing to do with what we're talking about. And Jesse says, specifically the part about being born in the USA or anywhere. I don't know what that means. Amazing that he goes on to say, amazing that the United States government spends so much money fighting these cases with regard to U.S. territories when all they have to do is ask Congress to act on them. Article 2, Section 3, Clause 2 makes it clear who has the power over the territories. Well, apparently you don't understand the role of an independent judiciary in our tripartite government, Jesse. So keep listening, and it'll probably become clearer as time goes on. And then finally, Chris Nye Jr. wants to know if there's a couch for sale. And if there's a couch for sale, I don't know if we would have to determine the citizenship of the couch, if the Facito Manu case would have a bearing on the citizenship of the couch. I kind of doubt it, but it could be. Okay, so some potentially interesting possibilities arising from this case. Now, of course, it could very well be it could very well be that the 10th Circuit will just say, no, we're adopting the reasoning from the District of Columbia Circuit, end of story. And that could be the end of it until Weir brings suit in another circuit where the door wouldn't be barred by a circuit court decision on point. So I mentioned earlier that the government of American Samoa moved to intervene in this case on the part of the defendants, on the part of the United States, that is in opposition to the three folks from American Samoa who brought the case. And I have a letter here from the non-voting delegate of American Samoa to the United States Congress. Her name is Amata Raduagan. And it's quite interesting. It's right on point, but I don't want to rush it. I hear the real Joe Cruz's favorite song playing already. So come back tomorrow and we'll talk a little bit more about American Samoa, United States citizenship, and related subjects. Been a lot of fun. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Preparing to impeach